I didn't know we were on.
3, 2, 1 means it's our turn to go.
I thought he was just hitting buttons over the computer. Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome into the Garden here in Boston. We've got the Blues. We've got the Bruins tonight. Chris Kerber filling in for Darren Pang here on Game Day Live along with Joe Vitale. And, Joe, I got to be honest with you. You don't look too bad this morning.
Yeah, I feel okay. I feel fairly decent. Got to bed at a decent hour.
Well, you got to bed early.
We did. Yeah, for Boston,
Yeah.
how we did it last year, I would say last night or this morning was an early bedtime, yes.
Well, what a place this was in the Stanley Cup final. June 12th was Game 7 for the St. Louis Blues. Of course, they won the Stanley Cup that day. An early season trip here back to the scene of the crime, and what a great feeling it was coming back into the city knowing what happened. All that said, all bets are off now for a rematch here. So let's look at it from a couple of angles. First off, is there a carryover from a playoff into the regular season when two teams meet?
Well, Curbs, I've always felt as a player that teams and players don't have that hangover from game to game as much because you just keep moving forward in a season. I think there is one situation where there could be a hangover, there could be a little bad blood still instilled in both teams from the previous meeting, and that's only probably in a Game 7 setting like it was in the Stanley Cup final here. Last time we were doing this, Game 7, it's just amazing. We were in the morning before Game 7. It's just the two extremes based off the outcome of that game were just so drastic.
Right.
It's like, you go in to find out what the sex of your baby is. It's either a boy or it's a girl. It's got to be one or the other, but they're both so different, and that game was kind of the same way. You win the game, you have the parade, you have the ring ceremony, you have the world tour with the cup, and then you lose it like the Boston Bruins did, and then you have a very quiet summer of what could have been and what should have been, maybe some regrets. So that being said, with the completely drastic change in the outcome and how it made both teams so different, I think there's going to be some bad blood in the air tonight.
Bad blood wouldn't be bad in a game of hockey. You see the great rivalry that's formed now with Drew Doughty and Matthew Tkachuk, and every now and then you need some villains.
Yes, I agree.
Whether it's an individual or whether it's a team, we need some villains.
I agree. I think Marchand's going to be a decent Bruins villain. He's always been a villain for every team. And this is a Boston Bruins team, Curbs, that, let's be quite honest, they didn't really miss a drop. They haven't missed a step this year. Only one regulation loss. Defensively, letting up the least amount of goals in the league. Tuukka Rask is the best save percentage. Their power plays clicking. Pasternak's leading the league in goals right now at 10. So it's going to be a huge test here tonight, especially with number 91 who didn't make the trip.
Yeah, so that's where we start with this one. Vladimir Tarasenko did not make the trip. He will be reevaluated on Monday when the Blues get back in town. The Blues, of course, going back-to-back games for the first time this season. Tonight in Boston, tomorrow, early evening game in Detroit. But the Blues have put together maybe back-to-back their best games of the season coming into this one.
I agree. I think the Colorado game 2 games ago was, of course, a great win. You're playing a division rival, one of the hottest teams in the National Hockey League. But for me, I thought the last game was maybe even a bigger win. You're playing the LA Kings, maybe not as good of an opponent, but you need to see some traction. You got to see some consistency in your play. If you're up and you're down and you kind of do that seesaw thing, it's not a good setup for a successful team. So I actually thought the last game versus LA Kings was probably the Blues' most impressive win, especially given the fact that the leading goal scorer was out in that game with Vladimir Tarasenko. Some big guys stepped up in big moments of that game. Zach Sanford, probably his best performance of this season already. He was great on that third line with Robert Thomas. I expect to see those two young guys with Tyler Bozak here again tonight.
Well, and one of the question marks will be who fills in for Vladimir Tarasenko on that spot. We saw when Vladdy went out for that second and third period, that fell on Oscar Sundqvist to start.
Yeah, Oscar Sundqvist was double shifting. I talked to him this morning in the elevator. He looked refreshed. He looked ready to go. He doesn't expect to be double shifted tonight because hopefully maybe a Sammy Blais gets back in the lineup, who is on the trip. He was a little dinged up last game, dealing with an upper body injury. Maybe he gets slotted in that position. Maybe they do throw Oscar Sundqvist up on that top line. Maybe Sammy Blais drops down. A lot just kind of depends on health of the forwards here, but it's going to be an interesting one. Whoever plays with Braden Shen and Jaden Schwartz, an honor obviously to play with those two guys, especially with how hot Braden Shen's been lately.
Blues, for the most part, a better job staying out of the penalty box in that last game. They had a run where they were going into the penalty box a lot over a 4 or 5 game stretch. It was 20 different penalty kills in that scenario. Tonight's one of those nights. You definitely want to try and stay out of the penalty box. Boston's power play has been good here in the early going.
It was one of the best in the league, and you mentioned Pastrnak, Marchand. I mean, Char's sometimes a big body in front of the net. Krug, I mean, just the defensemen, the weapons they have is pretty crazy to think not only the power play is good, and this is going to be a big key tonight, Curbs, because we mentioned the hangover, we mentioned the emotion. emotions, the extra oomph into this kind of game. It's very important to stay disciplined in the sense that there's going to be moments in the game where you can let your emotions get the best of you. And I think the Blues have got to do a really good job of kind of playing to that edge but not stepping over it. You look at Jordan Binnington last game, gets in the face of Kyle Clifford, but he didn't cross that line. He just kind of stared him down, and you don't take that extra penalty. It's going to be very evident that the Blues do that tonight.
Speaking of that, before we go, we got to talk about the fight right at the end.
Yeah.
Barbashev went off.
Baby. Don't you love it? I called him Rocky Balboa yesterday. I don't think he knew who Rocky Balboa was. But, I love the energy. I love
Well, he might have known who Drago is.
Yeah, he may have known his partner, the guy he beat. I loved it. I love the fact that Wagner challenged him. I talked to him on the plane yesterday about it. He said he whacked him, and Barbashev whacked him back, and he kind of stared him down. And you know what? It's a great thing. It's a pride on the line, and he stuck up for himself. He stuck up for his teammates. And whenever you can add some emotion into the game, and Ivan Barbashev can fight. We saw him do it last year in Chicago. Certainly did some the really good punches there in that fight as well. Threw some righties, especially at the end, and he was laughing and giggling at the end. He goes, "Oh, I was so happy that he was cut. Made me look like I won the fight." So.
Well, I wonder how many people had Ivan Barbashev on the in the pool for the first fight of the year for the Blues.
Oh man, not many. I would have lost that bet.
You'd have gotten some real good odds there. Well, it's a nationally televised game tonight, folks. The game on the TV side is on NBC Sports Network. Of course, you can get all the action on the radio side on 101 ESPN with the Mitsubishi Electric pregame show starting at, what would that be, 5 o'clock St. Louis time? And then the BMW of West St. Louis pregame skate at 5:30 before the puck drop at 6 o'clock St. Louis time. So have a terrific day today. We are back where the St. Louis Blues won the Stanley Cup. It ought to be a special atmosphere from that aspect. And then we'll see how the regular season matchup between these two teams goes later tonight in Boston.